And good afternoon, everyone. Special welcome to all you students joining us today. We're glad you're able to do that, and I think you're going to get a lot of benefit out of listening to our special guest tell his story. I also want to say happy election day to everyone. If you're eligible to vote, I hope you exercised your right to vote today, and if not, I hope you'll do that before the polls close. That's an important privilege of our democracy and an important right of citizenship here. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you. As Jennifer said, I'm Ron Rand. I'm privileged to serve as the CEO and president of the Congressional Medal of Honor Foundation. We're a 501(c) dedicated to perpetuating the legacy of the medal and the recipients. The Medal of Honor is the highest award for valor that our country can bestow on a member of the armed forces. Since it was signed into law in 1861 by President Abraham Lincoln, it has been presented just 3,509 times. Today there are 79 living recipients. The values that are embodied in the medal, values like courage and sacrifice, commitment and integrity, citizenship and patriotism, are values that the recipients believe in their hearts that reside in all Americans. So the recipients initiated a character development program to teach those values and to teach the purpose of an honorable life lived according to those values in schools across the country. The curriculum was developed by teachers for teachers. There are 57 full lesson plans. The curriculum is available online. You're able to write to us and we'll send you a DVD with the full program. And we conduct a monthly webinar to talk about the program in addition to teaching it to teachers around the country. It's available all of those ways, and we hope you'll take advantage of that. We're honored to have with us today one of the 79 living recipients to share his story and his perspective on the legacy of the medal that he wears. It's my privilege to introduce that hero now. One of the newest recipients, he earned his medal in a battle for Combat Outpost Keating in Afghanistan on October 3rd, 2009. President Obama presented his medal in a White House ceremony on February 11th last year, 2013. Clint's a devoted husband to Tammy, an amazing father to his 3 kids, and he makes his home now in Minot, North Dakota. Please join me in welcoming Clint Romesha. Clint, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Let's get right into a little bit of a background. Tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up, how you grew up, and what led you to the Army.
I'm originally from Northern California. My family had moved there back in the days of the covered wagon, as this country was kind of getting founded. I grew up in a tiny little town up there called Cedarville. About 800 people were there when I was growing up, and just a rural community. A lot of agriculture up there. We did farming, we raised cows. So life was quite a bit simple, it seemed. And growing up, I just kind of knew, I wanted to join the service. I wanted to kind of give back to my country. I came from a family tradition of military service, going back to my grandfather, who was in World War II, my father, who was a Vietnam veteran. Both my older brothers, Travis and Preston, had served in the military. And so I just kind of always knew from the start I wanted to be in the military, join the Army. For a while there when I was younger, I thought I wanted to be a paleontologist, but I couldn't spell that word, so I knew that was kind of out of the question. But
you could spell grunt.
Yeah. One-syllable words is where I make my money on. So as my senior year was coming to an end in high school, I didn't apply for any colleges. I was tired of digging fence posts for Dad and milking cows, and I wanted to get out and see the world. And so I decided to join the Army. I was still 17 at the time, though, when I graduated. I went up to my father and I asked him, hey, I've been talking to the recruiter. I want to join, but because I'm 17, I need a parent or guardian signature to allow me to go. And Dad had very just calmly kind of pulled me aside and talked to me, just very briefly said, right now our nation's not at war. This was back in 1999. But knowing that if you join the military, maybe not tomorrow and maybe not in 10 years, but if you join, there's a chance your nation will call upon you to go do and see some things you'll never forget. Experiences that, as a veteran that he had been through in Vietnam, is life-changing. And he said, I will not sign for you. You'll wait till you're 18, and when you're 18 and an adult in the eyes of this country, you can make the decision on your own. And on my 18th birthday, I went and I signed up, and a couple of weeks later, I shipped off to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic.
How many years were you in before you went over to Afghanistan in 2009?
I was almost at 10 years at that point. I'd been in the military.
And when you found out you were going to Afghanistan, did you know you were going to Keating?
We were fortunate enough to, before heading over there, we'd gotten told that we were going to Afghanistan. We got told we were going to the Nuristan Province. I got told we were going to Outpost Keating. And fortunate for us, we had Sergeant Joshua Kirk, who was with the 173rd, that was just operating in that area 8 months prior. And in fact, Sergeant Kirk had waived his dwell time so he could go back in the fight with our unit. Because typically you get, for however many days or months you're overseas, you get that time back in the States. And his selfless service to want to go with the guys again on a short turnaround was pretty amazing to see that kind of commitment. But to have that firsthand account of what Kirk would tell us about Outpost Keating, you can watch all the PowerPoint presentations you want. You can see kind of pictures. It doesn't do it any justice than when you have that firsthand account of someone that was actually boots on the ground there. And what Kirk had taught us and told us how we needed to adjust our training for the extreme elevations of the mountains and the tightness of that outpost, and how the enemy maneuvers was really a instrument to our success.
I've heard you talk about your reaction upon arriving at Outpost Keating. Explain a little bit about the first thoughts you had as you got to the base and looked around.
Well, we knew from getting there that the only way to access the outpost was by helicopter. The road that had led up there had long been taken out. It wasn't wide enough to put vehicles on it anymore. In fact, it was named after Lieutenant Ben Keating, who had died in a rollover accident on their way to the outpost, is how the cop got its name. And so we'd only fly at night when there was zero illumination from the moon or the stars, because it made it harder for the enemy to see the aircraft. And so that first night when we got there and landed, and I had my night vision goggles on, I remember stepping off the back of the bird, off the landing zone, and was walking up into the outpost with the unit we were replacing us, kind of guiding us along so we wouldn't get lost. And I just remember looking around and seeing nothing but just, complete darkness, which was kind of strange because typically you can catch a little bit of illumination in your nods and pick out some terrain features and stuff, but it was just a dark silhouette no matter which way you looked. So for a while there, I thought my night vision goggles were broke or messed up or something. But it wasn't until the next morning when the sun came out, stepped outside the barracks, and just remember looking out across the way, and you just see nothing but mountains. And the higher up you look, the taller the mountains got, and they just seemed to keep going. And it didn't matter what direction you were looking, there was just nothing but mountains right there. And so everything that Sergeant Kirk had told us about, it really just hit hard right then, knowing that this was not the most ideal spot, but it's great to accept a challenge.
So the high ground was all around you.
The
military doctrine says take the high ground, and you were on the low ground, surrounded by high ground.
Yeah, you want to take you know, the best terrain to have for a defensive position is on top, looking down, because anybody that's going to attack or come against you has to fight, you know, simple aspects of gravity, and it's easier to see. There's not as many dead spots, as we call it. Yeah, it was kind of the polar opposite of what the definition of a defensive position was by military doctrine.
So the day of your Medal of Honor action was intense and long and grueling. What do you take away from it? What do you, when you think back on it, when you think back on what led to you wearing that medal, what do you take away from that day?
I take away a sense of pride of soldiers all around me, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the 50 other Americans there with me, the 8 guys that gave up everything so I could come home. The sense of pride that you can stack all the odds against one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, fighting forces of the world, the U.S. military and the U.S. Army. You can throw everything you've got at us, and teamwork and just commitment to your brothers to your left and right it's going to reign triumph. You're not going to be pushed back. You're not going to be beat down. As long as there's still fight left in there, you can keep going forward.
Clint's I've known Clint for a year now. Clint's a very humble guy, and he wouldn't tell you this on his own. But he's an amazing leader. He cares deeply about the men in his command. I can't express it any more eloquently or anywhere as close to as eloquently as you will see in this video that we're going to show you now. It shows you the character and the leadership and the values this young man brings to the fight. Can you run that video now, please?
I used to tell my guys, we're all going over together. Not everyone's coming back. Meaning alive. But everyone is coming back. You just can't leave. Can't even think about leaving someone behind. No matter what the cost.
Throughout history, the question has often been asked, why? Why do those in uniform take such extraordinary risks? And what compels them to such courage?
The Medal of Honor is not often given when things went well on a battlefield. It tends to come at a price, and heroes are often revealed. Some say I'm a hero, but it doesn't make sense because I got to come home. 8 of my brothers fought to survive for a place we had called home, and more importantly, they fought for their comrades. And in the end, they gave their lives in that defense. They are the real heroes here today. I will wear it with dignity and humility in their honor. I vow to respect their memories and carry each of them in my heart for the rest of my life.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, that entire video, which is about 9 minutes long, it's worth every second of your time. It's available in one of the links that has been sent to you already. Another reminder, I have some more questions for Clint, but you're able to send your questions in to us throughout the whole webinar, excuse me, and the sooner you start sending them, the sooner I'll shift to your questions from mine. But let's shift gears for a minute. Clint, and let's talk about getting the medal, because sometimes that's even harder than earning the medal. So where and when did you find out you were going to receive the medal? How did you find that out?
I was working up on a job site up in North Dakota, and I got a random phone call from a number I did not recognize one day. So I answered the phone, and on the other end of the line, there was a full-bird colonel that identified himself and asked me to identify myself, and the first thing I thought was, oh heck, what did I do to get in trouble now?
You were still in the Army at the time?
No, I'd been out for
Okay.
almost a year at that point. And he, like I said, this colonel had called me up and said, hey, I need to talk to you about something, but I can't do it over the phone. I need you to come out to DC and tell you in person. And you know, it kind of a little odd, but I'd been told shortly after the action that day that I got put in for a Distinguished Service Cross, and I kind of figured that's what it was. Kind of thought they might have just would have put that in the mail and sent it to me or something, but I had told the colonel that, you know, I just started working a new job after making the transition out of the military, and I didn't have enough vacation days to save up to go back to DC for a little 4-day weekend or whatever. So I told him as soon as I have enough leave days saved up, I'll give you a call back. Hung up the phone and, well, waited about 4 weeks or so before I finally kind of told my wife and told my employer that I'd gotten this call, and then called them back and made the arrangements to come out to DC to see what it was about. I remember coming into DC, and as soon as I got off the airplane, made it through security, there's a full bird colonel sitting there, full dress uniform, and I'm just thinking to myself, you know, what did I do to get in trouble? I've been out for long enough. The statute of limitations should be up for anything bad I did. But he grabbed me and got my bags, and we went straight to the Pentagon from there. Came into the Pentagon, and as soon as I got in through security there, started getting met by, you know, 1-star generals, 2-star generals, all this high brass. And being a staff sergeant, just lower enlisted in the military, typically if you've seen anything higher than a company commander, you know, it wasn't typically good news. So it was very overwhelming to see all this big brass coming up and congratulate me for something, and still very confused, didn't quite know what was going on. And they set me down at this table. I remember as I'm getting set down and kind of getting as comfortable as possible, I looked down and there were 3 posters in front of me. One was of Sal Junta, one was of Leroy Petrie, and one was of Sergeant Sabo, a Vietnam recipient posthumously. You know, and it's all Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor, Medal of Honor. And of course they start with their presentations, they start talking, and at this point I'm kind of checked out. Just kind of sitting there staring down, and they're talking, but it's like I'm sure a lot of the students out there can relate to when your teacher's talking and you're not really paying attention, you're just hearing the want, want, want. That's exactly what was going on. And I finally just started, I looked up and I called a timeout. I said, hey, you know, what is this? And one of the generals or colonels or whatever there was like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got all this Medal of Honor stuff in front of me. I had heard a rumor that I got maybe put in for a Distinguished Service Cross. So I don't understand what's going on here, why this is sitting here in front of me. And one of them replied back with, well, you don't know. I said, well, I wouldn't ask this question if I knew. And I was like, well, short of the president signing the award, you've been recommended for upgrade. You'll be receiving the Medal of Honor. And I kind of looked back up and I told him, well, you know, why me? There were 50 other guys there that day that did just as much as me. 8 of them didn't make it home that did even more than me. I was just doing my job. Nothing more, nothing less. And if it wasn't for those guys, I wouldn't be here, so why me? Of course, they started talking again, and I just toned it out. Shortly after we got done with that, though, they took me over to go see General Foley, a retired 3-star Vietnam recipient. And I got to sit down with him and talk to him for about an hour. And as we were sitting there talking, I asked General Foley the same question, you know, why me? I didn't do anything more, and he cut me off right there. And he said, well, Clint, this award is based on what your peers recommended of you. We'd realized that as we were reading your citation for your Distinguished Service Cross, and typically when we look at Medal of Honor actions, as we're kind of making the list of qualifying factors, you know, there's always something more you got to dig up. There's always more detail you need. There's more discovery to be found. He said, we got about halfway through your citation and we realized this was an action worthy of the Medal of Honor, and your peers believe that as well. And to understand that it came not from a higher level, but from the guys that were there that believed in me enough to deserve it, really hit home and really put a lot of things at ease.
So when did you tell Tammy, and when did you tell your family?
I'd told Tammy, I'd called her on the phone that night and told her that I was recommended for upgrade. My dad, on the other hand, though, and I never wanted him to worry, knowing what he had been through in Vietnam and stuff. So I didn't honestly tell my father until about a month before the actual ceremony what it was all about. And I just know he was so very proud. He was proud of me, and I'm proud of my guys. But it was just kind of one of those things that growing up, our family always had this tradition that, no news is good news. And just do the right thing. Just do what you do. Don't brag about how great you are or talk yourself up. Just let your actions speak for you. And I've always carried that through with me.
What was it like meeting the president?
It was, an experience I'll never forget, but can hardly remember. It was great to get to the White House and to be there with the families of the 8 guys we lost, my platoon mates that had served with me. Most of them were able to make it, in my family, and to be there all together as one unit, as one family again, and to share it with them. That was truly an amazing experience. To sit there and have my 2 younger kids, my son was just turning 2 at the time, and my middle daughter was 3, and having them jumping on the furniture at the White House and picking through apples and playing peekaboo behind the podium, and something they'll hopefully not soon forget.
So when you were making those remarks we saw in the video, you were actually speaking to the families of the 8 guys who didn't make it home.
Yeah, they were able to make it, the families of those guys.
What was the most important lesson you learned or memory you'll take away from your time in the Army?
I think the most important lesson is the values that the military instilled, and the values from what my family had taught me at an early age. Most importantly, the value of loyalty. I learned right away in the military that duty's going to get, as a leader, duty's going to get your guys to accomplish a mission. But when you have that value of loyalty with them, they'll not only do that mission, but they'll follow you anywhere. And loyalty has always been something that's just so profound. And the great thing with values too, though, is, I feel like today's age, we've got a lot of priorities going on. But values, if we hold true to them, values never change. Values, there's no ranking structure like there is priorities. And they're all integrated together, whether it's loyalty, whether it's integrity, whether it's patriotism, selfless service, or sacrifice. They're all on an equal playing field. And if we hold true to those values, you just can't go wrong.
You're a young guy, Clint. You have the whole future ahead of you. And you've only been wearing that medal now for almost 2 years. What's the effect been on you ever since the president put that medal around your neck?
It's been a life-changing event. Going from little Clint Romesha that was 100 pounds his freshman year of high school, and now being requested for certain events at major cities, organizations. It's overwhelming at times, but it's also a great opportunity to get out there and remind our kids, our younger generation, that I too was sitting in a classroom not too long ago, thinking to myself, wow, I'm just going to be just Clint the rest of my life and nothing great's going to happen, and it's given me the opportunity to sit here and tell you guys that, don't ever doubt yourself. Don't let someone tell you you're not going to be something that you can be. It's up to you. Don't think you're getting lost in a crowd. Take it upon yourself to be the best person you can be. To understand that, one day of my life shouldn't dictate the rest of my life. No, I'm going to continue on. I'm going to continue to push forward, to keep putting chapters in the book of life. Always improving your position is what we called it in the military. Just because you're comfortable with the status quo of something doesn't mean that's the best thing for you. You should always be pushing for bigger and better. Always challenge yourself, because if you're not challenging yourself, if you're not setting goals, you're setting yourself up for failure.
So go back for a minute. In your own words, when you were little Clint Romesha, what was it that made you react the way you did at Combat Outpost Keating on that fateful day? Was it the training? Was it the upbringing? What made you step up?
There's no, I guess, predetermined formula or equation that says if you do this, this, and this in life, this is going to be the outcome. But I do relate a lot back to my family, my grandfather teaching me life lessons of, if you're gonna tell someone you're gonna do something, do it. Because the only thing you have left in this world when everything's gone is the name. And how do you want people to think of that name? I look back to the training in the military. Like I said, having guys like Sergeant Kirk that were telling us kind of how treacherous the terrain was going to be over there, and adjusting our physical conditioning and our weapons training and our dismounted maneuvers. I look back to just doing the job. That's what I'd signed up to do, and to be the best at whatever you're doing. Anything worth doing is always worth overdoing.
We're beginning to get some really nice questions from people who are joining us through the webinar. I'm going to switch over to some of these questions now, Clint. First one is from Lori in San Antonio. Can you talk about specifically what you did to earn the medal?
It's hard to sit here and kind of talk all the specifics. It was a 13-hour firefight, and there was a lot that happened that day, and it's hard to give credit to all the guys that were around me. So I'm hoping I can kind of condense it enough. Basically, at about 6 o'clock in the morning, we'd gotten hit at our outpost by approximately 300 Taliban fighters from the high ground. These were not your average just spray and pray, as we'd call them, type of fighters. These guys were very well trained. They were well organized. They understood military tactics. And basically within the first hour of contact, they had the support by fire positions up on the mountain. Everything was raining down in on us. There was no place you could really step outside because you were in this bowl where you weren't taking fire from. And within that first hour, all of our defensive positions had been absolutely overwhelmed with fire. Most of them had either been, the weapon systems they had there had been taken out, or the guys on the perimeter defense, Sergeant Gallegos and Kirk and Raz and those guys, went into a cyclic rate of fire, meaning as fast as they could fire it, they were trying to fire back, and they, like I said, ran out of ammo. And shortly after that had happened, if there's nothing kind of shooting back, it gives the enemy free rein to do what they want with you. And it wasn't too much longer that they'd breached our perimeter, and we're inside our wire.
On the base with you?
On the base. We went from owning a area roughly a little bit larger than a football field, to own in an area about the size of home plate, it seemed. The enemy had put in anti-aircraft guns up in the mountains, so when the helicopters first came in to help support us, they were able to knock out the hydraulics of one of the aircraft, and in effect at that time made them pretty non-existent to support us. In the course of the day, as things were looking pretty bleak, we had a group of guys that were totally cut off and isolated. 5 guys up in the Humvee, Gallegos, Carter, Larson, Mace, and Martin. We were pretty sure that they were all gone, and the fear was that the enemy was going to start taking them. And we also knew we were isolated from our ammo supply point. The guys that were in that small little, what we ended up calling the Alamo position, we were running out of ammo. And we knew if we didn't get to the ammo supply point to take that back and refit us, we didn't have any more bullets. We weren't going to last very much longer to even help the 5 guys that were isolated. So with the help of 5 other guys that I asked for volunteers, and my platoon leader, Lieutenant Bunderman, came up with this harebrained idea to do a counterattack. That's the last thing the enemy would think you would do as they're overrunning you, would be to counterattack them. Yeah. And we were able to push up. We were able to get the ammo supply point back. We were able to push up again and close the front gate where the enemy had just been running through. And by the end of the day, we were able to get up to that Humvee position.
And that was you and a handful of guys?
It was myself and 5 volunteers of Raz, Delaney, Danley, Miller, and Jones. Like I said, I've never been more proud in my life that when I walked into that barracks, didn't even tell the guys the plan. I just said, hey, I need volunteers. And those 5 guys, I mean, without hesitation, they will follow you anywhere. And I think if the roles were reversed, if I had some harebrained 5'5" guy running into a barracks yelling for volunteers and then telling us we're going to counterattack with 5 guys against 300 plus, I don't know if I would have the stones to do it. Like I said, it was bravery and heroism like that from the guys around me just doing their job.
6th grader in Cedarville, California, were you scared that day?
You know, at the time, I don't remember being scared, but I just know something had taken over. Maybe it was fear that kind of blocked that emotion. But being scared is good. You can use that. You can use that to be productive. You know, don't get scared and not do something because you're scared. Get scared and do it because it scares you. I knew deep down inside that, you know, that was my job. That's what I was signing up to do. I knew I had battle buddies all around me doing their job. And if I was going to sit there and be scared, how was that going to help them? You know, facing your fears and overcoming. When you do that, the relief, the satisfaction of facing that down is a much better feeling than sitting there letting it just consume you.
Great answer. Kirsten Refuse, I hope I got your name right, Kirsten. At what moment did you feel like you were finally safe?
It was about 9 months later when we came back to the U.S. and linked up with our families. Because after that day, we still had 9 more months left in Afghanistan to keep going.
But after that day, were you still at Keating, or did they move you to another
We had
location?
stayed at Keating for another 3 days to close down the rest of the outpost, and then we relocated a little bit farther south where our higher headquarters were.
To a better position, I hope.
In relative terms.
Yeah. From Miss Reynolds' 5th period class, do you ever have flashbacks to that day? And if you do, how are you able to deal with them?
When I reflect back to that day, I reflect back to the good times. I reflect back to Copus, who was the only defensive position still left in the fight, where he, for 13 hours, sat in that one Humvee, the only position still holding down our eastern flank. I reflect back to the time when Larson was able to make it from that Humvee where he was isolated at for almost 6 hours, and on his way back bringing, you know, warm Dr. Peppers for us to drink. You know, I reflect back to, you know, Sergeant Hill sitting there asking me how I'm doing, am I shot, am I hurt, and because I was limping around and sitting there and in all of my embarrassment looking at him and telling him that no, I'm not shot, I dropped a weight on my foot the night before up in the gym. That's what I reflect back to, the good times. I mean, in the grand scheme of all the commotion and chaos going on that day, nothing good comes out of reflecting and dwelling on the bad. Turn it into something positive.
Question from the Northern Vance High School. If you could go back to high school, what would you do differently?
I probably wouldn't not take English for my first 2 years, so I didn't have 5 English classes my senior year to graduate.
You didn't take English the first 2 years?
No, I was too busy trying to take shop and
okay.
welding, and I had to play catch up my senior year.
How many years, 6th grade class in Cedarville, California, how many years total did you serve in the military?
I was at 11 and a half by the time I'd gotten out.
And you got out, when you did, why?
I'd left the military, honestly, because I was going to do 3 years, and that was it. Kind of just check the block. And like a lot of guys, like I kind of discovered, everyone kind of joins the military for one reason or another, whether it's to see the world or to get college in. I realized I like to serve, though. You join for one thing and you realize you start serving for another, and I wanted to serve because I wanted to give back to what this country gave me from the get. You know, just being born here, I was given one of the greatest gifts ever, and that's freedom. And to not pay that back to the men and women that had served before me, to just owe them a debt of gratitude. And as time went on, though, I realized that, you know, it was time to do something else. I'd been away for so long. My oldest daughter, you know, I was gone for the majority of her life growing up. The deployment strain. I enjoyed my time in the military, wouldn't give it up for anything, but it was time to kind of come home and be a husband and a father, because our families serve just as much as the servicemen and women that are going overseas.
Do your kids all understand what your medal means, and what do they think about being the children of a Medal of Honor recipient?
You know, the 2 little ones, I think, are still a little too young to understand. My oldest daughter, she's 13 now. You know, she knows the parameters, kind of the vague situation of why it happened. I don't think it'll be until they're truly older that they totally grasp and understand it, but it's still great to see that Dad still has to help them with homework, and Dad still has to help take out the trash. They keep you grounded, because regardless of whatever celebrity status you are, you know,
You're still
I still got to make chocolate milk.
Yeah.
You know.
You mentioned earlier that when you wanted to join when you were 17, you went and talked to your dad. And question from the Northern Vance High School: your father wouldn't sign for you when you're 17. Did his opinion on you joining change, or has it changed now?
No.
He was never against you joining. He just wanted you to make the decision, right?
Yeah, he was never against any of us boys joining, and I mean, he'd always just kind of wanted us to look at all of our options. And I always kind of felt it was his way of saying, you know, that's the great thing about this country, is we, like I said, we have that freedom. We can choose to serve or not, and service doesn't come with wearing a uniform. It truly doesn't. Service comes in all aspects of our life and our communities, whether it's from our local firefighters, our law enforcement, our teachers, our educators, our friends and families around the community. Service doesn't have to come from donning on the camouflage of the Army or the Marines or the Navy or the Coast Guardsmen. I think that was the more important idea he was trying to get across to us boys. But I know he was so proud of all of us that had served.
Good. Did you ever, this is from Jane O'Donnell, did you ever feel like giving up when you were on the battlefield?
You know, it's not even an option. It's a lot like if you go in to do something and you don't think you're going to be able to accomplish it, you've already lost at that point. You can't have doubt in your heart. You want to stack the odds all in your favor to make yourself the most successful or the best possible outcome, and there's just times it doesn't happen. But the one thing you never want to put in the back of your mind is, I'm going to fail at doing this. It's not a productive feeling. It's not a productive way to think about things. Continuing to push forward, to never give up. As long as you can take one more step, you've always got to take that one more. And you'll soon realize there's another one after that, and another one after that. And by the time you look back, you've walked 20 miles.
These are really great questions you're sending in. Thank you for doing that. We probably have 10 or 12 more minutes, and I have another 8 questions here, but if you have some more, keep them coming. Clint, Heather Tufts wants to know what high school was like for you.
High school was great. Growing up in the small community I was from, I knew a lot of my classmates.
How big was your high school class in that community?
Well, I like to brag that I graduated in the top 15 of my class out of the 14 that went there.
Huh. Your graduating class was 14?
Yeah.
That is a small community.
So it was great to be in that kind of environment where everybody knew each other. Really had a sense of what everyone was doing, and you couldn't help but sit there and look around the classroom and wonder what everyone was going to do afterwards. We had all different aspects of, even in that small of a classroom environment, all different personalities. And it was just always the wonder of what was going to happen next. Knowing that you had good friends right there on a moment's notice. You had someone to help bail you out when you wrecked a motorcycle or needed help hauling hay or what have you. It was one of the best experiences of my life that continued on through my military service.
4th grade in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. Who's your hero?
My hero? It's my grandfather and my dad. Those two men were, true examples of what I thought good fathers should be, what a respectable person should be. They never did it by being on TV and throwing 59 touchdown passes in a season. They did it by instilling values and giving life lessons and being there for you when you need it. 33 years old, I still call up my dad and ask him for life advice. My grandfather had passed away back in 2007, but
He didn't get to see you earn the medal?
no, he did not.
But he was watching.
Oh, guaranteed. Just the way people in the community and people when they reflect on talking about Grandpa Smith or Dad, just to hear how other people talk about them. Always in the positive, always talking about how honorable they were. That's what I want to grow up to be, is like them.
When they become of age, this is another one from Franklin Lakes in New Jersey. When they become of age, will you support your children joining the military?
I will give them the same advice my father did. They're, once again, being a great nation that we are, that freedom of choice, that, when you turn 18, whether they want to go to college, whether they want to join the military, whether they want to go to a trade school, having choices in life, having the freedom of going on this path or that path, it's going to be on them, and it's going to be on them to make that decision on their own. I can tell them my advice of the same thing my dad did. If you join, you will have an opportunity to experience things you'll never forget, and to understand that before making the choice. But when it comes down to it, it's ultimately on them to make that choice on their own.
We have lots of students joining us today. Lots of these questions are from the students. This is, and so you have a great ability today and in this conversation and all your conversations to address the burning issues some of these kids have. Here's a great question from sixth grader in Cedarville, California. What was the defining moment of your childhood?
The most defining moment of my childhood, I think, is when I won third at the Pinewood Derby contest for Cub Scouts. And I was so proud that day that I got to put my hands on something and create something. And
Was this like a soapbox derby?
kind of like the Cub Scouts, except you got a little piece of square balsam wood that you shape up into a little car and they run down the track.
Okay.
And I remember looking back on that day of, seeing hard work pay off. And yeah, you can look and say, well, it was just third place, but still, everyone wants to win the gold, but there's winners and losers in life, and I felt like a winner that day. And it just reinforced what my family had already taught me, that hard work and dedication, it pays off.
Another question from 12th grader at Belleville East High School. How did Tammy react to you getting the medal?
Go take out the trash.
And how is she still reacting?
Like I said, I'd never talked too much about her, about the specifics and the detail over there. And she had known from talking to some of my battle buddies I'd served with after getting back that, there was a big action going on. And I think it helped give a little bit of closure to her of the whole event and the whole experience of combat and conflict. Proud, but still, like I said, I'm still the same guy that has to go take out the trash and change the oil in the car. And
so that everybody understands, I know this because we've talked about this, but you've known Tammy ever since you guys were in high school, and she was married throughout your whole time in the service, right?
Yep. We'd gotten married as soon as I graduated basic. We'd gotten married. So she had been there with me, before all the deployments, from the start to the future.
How many deployments did you have in your 11 plus years?
Combat deployments was 3, 2 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. I was in Germany and did 2 deployments to Kosovo back then, and then I'd spent 15 months on a hardship assignment to Korea. So we'd been on and off.
Hardship means no family.
No
right?
family can, yeah. Yeah, she stayed, she went to college down at San Diego State while I was over there.
Another question from somebody at the New Kent Middle School. What was running through your mind as you got the medal? You said an interesting thing. It was a day that you'll never forget, but one you can hardly remember. What was running through your mind when you got the medal?
As I was up on stage and looking out across the crowd, like I said, just looking at my guys that had served with that day, sitting there, looking at my family, looking at the family members for the 8 guys that didn't make it back, it all kind of just came together, that I'm here representing them. And when I continue on with life, when I put this little blue ribbon of silk on, and I have to make a choice, I can reflect back and think, what would these guys think of me with this choice I make? Would they be happy with it? Am I doing the right thing? It's an overwhelming feeling. At the same time, it's a comforting one to know that I've got help there, that I've got the 8 guys still in my heart carrying along right with me, so they'll never be forgotten.
Powerful stuff, Clint. Captain Preston Lawrence asks, what do you do now? And again, how has wearing the medal affected you? You maybe have touched on those, but...
Currently, I'm still living up in good old North Dakota now. I'm in the process of working on a book about that day and incorporating the aspects of the guys on the ground there. Not just one person's point of view of what happened, but since it was such a long firefight and there were so many different things going on, to collect up, to have everybody's fingerprints of the guys serving, of the eight guys that didn't make it back, their families being able to participate and educating and, like I said, continuing on their legacy to help remember and immortalize them.
That's a good point to make for people. Some Medal of Honor actions are instantaneous and are over in a matter of minutes. Yours was several hours. Yours was 9 hours long.
Almost 13 by the time.
Almost 13 hours from start to finish. Last question. What made you choose the Army and not the Marines, the Navy, or the Air Force? This is from the MC2 Charter School.
For me, for the Army, it just seemed to click. Like I said, my dad was in the Army. My grandfather was in the Army. My oldest brother was in the Army. My second oldest brother went into the Marines. And I don't know where he strayed off on that one. But, you know, it was just always the Army. Whether it was the training or the uniforms, or I really couldn't tell you, but I just always knew I just wanted to be in the Army. I wanted to jump out of a helicopter, and I wanted to wear green, and I wanted to be in a fraternity surrounded by, colleagues and peers and mentors that you just can't hardly find anywhere else.
Well, I want to thank you for your service. Thank you for your time today and for sharing your story and your views and your answers with all of the people joining us on the webinar. You're a heck of a guy, Clinton. I'm proud to know you, so thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ron.
That's all the time we have for you today. On your screen are our websites where you can find more information, including how to ask to get a DVD copy of our Medal of Honor Character Development Program. Please take a minute and register for a free kit. You know what I said last question, but I want to ask one more. Clint, what do you want your legacy to be?
For me, my legacy, like I said, I don't want it defined on one day, one action. I want my legacy to be when my 3 kids grow up, Desi, Gwen, and Colin. When they grow up and they become successful and they create families of their own and they're healthy and happy. That's where my legacy resides.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks again, Clint, for being with us. Thank you all for your interest in our webinars and for joining us for today's conversation. Please join us again next month on December 4th for our next character development, Medal of Honor Character Development webinar. We'll sign off now and turn it back over to Jennifer.